I mean, I can see both sides of that argument in terms of, sexual identity and creating art.
Hmm.
But for me, when I'm writing, I'm never trying to make sure that the music is sort of like down the middle of the road, so that it's applicable to whoever wants to hear it, or that it doesn't offend anyone, or that it doesn't alienate any sort of, specific ears or whatever. I have always, from the start of my artistic career, be it music or visual art or whatever it is, have felt like it's a great opportunity to be able to express from an LGBTQ perspective.
Today on Rainbow Country, a spotlight on American queer artist Eric Terino, who joins me to talk about his current album, Indelible Sundries, creating music through a queer lens, and more.
Hi there, I'm Bennett Singer, a documentary filmmaker and the co-director of the new film Cured, which is currently available on PBS and on the PBS video app. You are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Eric Terino, hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me again.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. I have to say thank you for returning to Rainbow Country.
It's my
To
pleasure.
to have your continued story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for
Mm.
this, especially to talk about you have a new album out, Indelible Sundries. It's a live album. Let's just jump right in. How would you describe the sound, the sonic landscape of Indelible Sundries?
Well, I think it's definitely not a departure, but more of an evolution from the previous record, Innovations of Great Perversity, which is what we talked about the last time I was here. So it sort of stays in that folk sort of vein, but it's more autumnal. It's a little less it's a little less produced, I guess, which is a result of it being live. Well, live in quotes, which we'll discuss more, I'm sure. But yeah, it's definitely still a folk record, still a stripped back, natural instrumentation kind of feel, but it's its own world, I think. Especially compared to all the other records I've made. It feels much more delicate, I think, in a way.
So this is a live album of yours. Talk to me about why putting out a live album.
Well, it's a live album in quotations. It's a conceptual live album. So I suffer from agoraphobia, which I think we spoke about the last time
Mm.
when I was here. And so when I was putting together, or actually when I was promoting the previous record, and I had sort of finished going through the cycle of promotion, it felt like the natural next step would be to do a tour, to do live performances to
Mm.
support the record. But since that's something that is outside of my ability, I was trying to come up with a way to sort of get that end result, but from a different route. And I did a couple live performances on some other radio programs and podcasts and things. And so I sort of laid the groundwork for how I could do these remote live performances with the band that played on that record, who all returned to be in this touring band. And it sort of built up from there on its own. I originally just planned on doing this like an EP, just something really quick, maybe just release it digitally and not have it be a big thing. But it ended up being that these performances and these songs wanted to be their own record. It wanted to be its own project. And even though it began in a place of wanting to create a show around that previous record, it definitely became its own thing and its own sound and its own sonic world, as you said earlier. So yeah, so I did all of these remote live sessions with the 11 musicians from the band from all around the world. they're in Ukraine and the UK and different places in America, Italy, Russia. They're all over the place. And we, it was almost like making a movie. It was like building sort of a sonic movie, because none of it is, in a way, none of it's real. But then conversely, to me, it is all real. You know, it's all authentic to my life and my experience. But yeah, even the applause that you hear between the songs, that was all recorded individually by uh, fans and friends and other artists. And I reached out to strangers. You know, I was just seeing who I could get to come to the show, basically. So it was an imagined evening that I really, it took a lot of effort to put it together, but I am pleased that we were able to do it.
So, okay, so help me. So, you suffer from agoraphobia.
Mm.
Is that the correct term?
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's
that's
a,
and how, in a nutshell, what is that again?
well, it's sort of a symptom of an anxiety disorder more so than its own uh, disorder. I mean, though I guess you could say that it depends on who you ask. But to summarize, basically, it means that it's difficult for me to travel, I mean, there are different levels of severity. For some people, it can be they can't step outside of their front door, you know, it can get that extreme. And I've had moments in my life where it has veered towards that. Uh, but it's more so about a fear of exposure, I think, in a way. Um, so yeah, for me, I'm able to go out, to go outside, but I'm not able to, like, I can't get in a car. I can't drive, you know, miles and miles away. I certainly like couldn't get on a plane or anything like that. Though it's a condition that I've had, I think, sort of latent in myself all my life, but it's not been active, certainly for all of my life. Like I was just recently talking with someone about how when I think I was 19, I went to Greece by myself, which is to me like unthinkable now. But it's, yeah, I think for a lot of people they would find it debilitating, but I don't. I like in making this record, there are ways around it. There are ways to still feel like you're living a full, healthy life.
So
Um,
in putting together this record, then how did you do it? Did you do it virtually all at once? Like, did you guys all play at the same time? Did you do it yourself and say the cellist and yourself and then the pianist, like
mm,
essentially one track, one instrument at a time, and yourself? Walk me
yeah,
through that process of it.
it was more so the latter. There were some instances where things were recorded together, specifically when it was myself playing an instrument. You know, I would record that as if it was done live. But for the most part, it would begin with myself recording either just a vocal, you know, on top of, yeah, something like a cello track or a harp track. There's predominantly more harps than anything else, I think, on this record, which is another thing that sort of sets it apart from the previous records.
Mm-hmm.
But I would begin with that, with a vocal and one instrument, both recorded in just a single take. And then, yes, then I would send it over to, you know, the another cellist or a string octet or
Mm-hmm.
whoever was going to record their part, and they would do that with the guidelines laid out. You know, I would explain the
Right,
concept to them
right.
and explain what we were trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
and they would record that their part in a single take. And then yeah, and then it was just kind of
And then
layered on
just
top of each other.
build from there.
Yeah.
So so mistakes and all would be okay then, because if you're just doing it in one take, if you were performing live, that's how it would be.
Right. And that was scary. That was a scary part of this, especially as I'm not someone who performs live. I've performed live once in my life. When my first record came out in 2013, so 11 years ago, I did one very long 3 or 4 hour performance at the new museum on the Lower East Side in New York, which was part of this exhibit where it was an unusual performance. It was I was in sort of the entrance of the museum, and there was a microphone that was feeding what I was playing up into this big room with like white walls that people were invited to sort of draw on and do all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so that was my only actual experience performing live, and it was a long time ago. So my world musically is very sort of safe, and yeah, and all of those things can be corrected if anything goes wrong. But I was up for the challenge. I wanted to see how it would go. I wanted to include those mistakes, and in the end, I think those errors, I mean, if you want to call them that, but those sort of human defects
Mm-hmm.
in the music
Mm-hmm.
are what make it more interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, Indelible Sundries, this is a live album. It's also available as limited editions. You've got mahogany double vinyl set. You have metallic gold double vinyl set. You also have
Mm.
metallic gold as a cassette. So, talk to me about releasing this recording and really also releasing it as limited editions, vinyl and cassette. Talk to
Mm.
me about that decision.
So I've done all of my records on cassette from 2013 to the present. And there's something about the sound of a cassette that I just think works well with the kind of music I make. That sort of lo-fi, the like slight tape hiss, that sort of distortion adds or enhances the warmth in it, I think. I hope. But yeah, making the physical stuff is it's rewarding, it's exciting, and I love doing that, and I love bringing all that together. But it is a lot of work, especially when you release something independently and you're doing it all
Hmm.
yourself.
And so, is
But
there has to be then a market for this, correct?
oh yeah, for sure. The I would say that the cassette market is probably lessening now, but it was heightening. I mean, it was at a new height maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And yeah, still to this day, you'll see most artists will release a cassette version of their album. And I think that probably also comes down to the fact that, especially as an independent artist, to release a cassette is significantly less expensive than to put out the vinyl. The vinyl is a lot. Um, Probably a CD is the most affordable version, but I've actually never released a CD. Uh, yeah, and that's a deliberate choice too, I guess, because in the age of streaming and digital music, I never really
Mm-hmm.
saw the point in a CD. Even though I was raised on CDs, I mean that's my era.
Mm. Okay, so names and titles. I always love finding out the genesis of you know, when an author like decides to name their book whatever or a
Mm,
movie or a song, like where does the title come from? Okay, so 2013, Mountains of Nothing in Love,
mm,
Mountains of Nothing in Love. 2018, Champagne and Childhood Hunger.
mm,
Champagne and Childhood Hunger. 2022, what? Innovations of Grave Perversity. Innovations of Grave Perversity. 2024, Indelible Sundries. These are all okay. Personally, I would never ever think of something like those titles, like
mm.
those lyrics, those words coming together to create those things. So how do you decide on the titles for the name of your tracks, for the name of your albums, because those are all from 2013 to 2024. Those are all your album titles. So
Mm.
how do you talk to me about that process of picking such unique titles for your works?
It's definitely a goal to make them unique.
Hmm.
I think for the sake of the work standing out and actually especially starting my writing career in the digital age, I'm always conscious of the fact that if you're Googling something or trying to search for something, even if you say to your Echo device, play such and such song or play such and such album, if it's got a title that is used by numerous people, then you're not going to be able to find your version. So part of that is in my mind as I'm coming up with these titles, but I think more so than anything, it's interesting to me to find words that can play off of each other and sort of set a mood. Uh, and that's what I've tried to do. I mean, specifically with this one, with Indelible Sundries, that title actually came to me in a dream, which is a thing that happens sometimes. Um, I'll wake up in the middle of the night I'll just have like a phrase running around my head and have to rush to write it down before I forget it. And that's what happened with this. And that phrase, when I woke up that day, that phrase to me was somewhat impenetrable, and I wasn't sure what it meant to my life and the work that I wanted to do. But I saved it, I tucked it away, and I spent some time with it. And when this project came around, and it's a live record, but a record that is in a way a best of because it doesn't have any newly written songs. It's all the songs over the course of the past 11 years. And Indelible Sundries to me was the perfect title for an overview because what it meant was what I felt like these songs were, which are these moments that are ingrained in myself, but sort of just like miscellaneous moments, from scattered throughout my life. Nothing uh, necessarily monumental, though I think there are some monumental moments in my life represented in these songs. But this sort of permanent miscellany is how I viewed these songs and how they related to my life. And so I thought that was the such a good title for this specifically. But yeah, all of the records, they all of those titles have sort of a very specific meaning to me, but the focus is also to make it ambiguous enough that you can sort of lay your own meaning on it. However you like Mountains of Nothing and Love, however you choose to view that, there's different ways you can read that title and how you can lay meaning into it. So that's something I'm always trying to do too.
Mm. Do you have do you have a favorite album title out of the ones that you've
Oh,
released?
I mean, it's probably Innovations of Diversity. That one is probably my favorite. That one was one that I think took the
I'm like, am
most
I saying
time
this right? Am
to,
I reading this right? Like what?
yeah. And that one is actually, I was trying to come up with a long-handed way of saying changes, which is what that period in that record represented for
Mm,
me. So that's probably my favorite. That was one that I definitely played around with a lot.
mm,
Um, but all of them, all four of the album titles and song titles too, and that's another
mm,
process that I think is sort of specific unto itself. There are some songs that have the title comes from the chorus.
mm,
It's obvious what the title of the song wants to be. But I have a number of songs where, like, there's a song on that previous record called "A Snowfall at Dusk," which is, a phrase that's not mentioned anywhere in the song, and there isn't any sort of direct language that connects to
mm.
that phrase. But that giving it that title sort of paints the picture in a totally different way. So I think the way that you name a song can be a really important aspect of the songwriting itself. Even, in addition to the actual composition of the notes and the lyrics and all that stuff. I think that's an important part of it.
So, Indelible Sundries, this is a live album. Features the Innovations Band. You've got upright piano, classical guitar, you've got drums, you've got strings, you've got violin, viola, cello, double bass, you've got trumpet, French horns, you've got harp, flute, musical saw, not to
Mm.
mention background vocals, and of course, vocals. Are these all musicians that you've known? Are they just musicians that are hired guns? How did you end up putting together this band for this particular project?
So it's sort of a mix of all of that. Some of them are friends and people that I've known. Um, I was actually lucky enough again to work with Jolie Holland, who is an American. She's also, like myself, kind of hard to define genre-wise, but most people would say Americana, I guess, is the genre, or folk, or alternative, that kind of stuff. But she's an artist who was one of my favorite artists when I was a teenager, and has been around since I think 2003. She released her first album. But she worked on did some things on my previous record, and I was lucky enough to get her back for this. But the majority of the musicians, they all were on that previous record, and they all played on my last album, and that's how the band came together. But it is a band in air quotes because we aren't. I mean, also because of the conceptual nature of the project. We are not a band, a touring band. We are not physically in the same room playing music together. But they came about from when I was trying to find musicians to play on that previous record. And so I have a sort of established working relationship with all of the musicians. And fortunately, I was able to find all of these extremely talented people who are able to understand the music I want to make and the sort of unorthodox way in which I make it. So yeah, so I'm feel fortunate to have found them. And I'm curious to see where things will head next because I loved working with all these people on the last record and this record, but also by nature, I'm always wanting to do something different. So even though it was the same band, this project was so different from the last one. The approach to it was so different. The way it was recorded was so different. So I can't imagine doing the same thing again for the next project. But yeah, but we'll see because I love all of them, so I would be happy to work with them again.
If I gathered bloodless leaves, would you hold them all for me? If I kicked the barn door down, would I find your hands on the ground?
So Eric Terino, you are a visual artist. You are a singer, a songwriter, a musician. You're also part of the LGBT community. You are you are gay, and I'm curious to know for yourself when you are creating your music, do you think you are creating your music from a queer perspective? Do you think you're doing it consciously? Is it something that that you consciously do, that you are aware of, or is this something that just comes out, or it's irrelevant? It has nothing to do. Your sexuality has nothing to do with the art that you create. How do you see that?
For me, it's definitely relevant. I mean, I can see both sides of that argument in terms of, sexual identity and creating art.
Hmm.
But for me, when I'm writing, I'm never trying to make sure that the music is sort of like down the middle of the road, so that it's applicable to whoever wants to hear it, or that it doesn't offend anyone, or that it doesn't alienate any sort of, specific ears or whatever. I have always, from the start of my artistic career, be it music or visual art or whatever it is, have felt like it's a great opportunity to be able to express from an LGBTQ perspective. It's not just uh, it's not just a great opportunity. I also think it's important. I think it's important for our voices to be heard and to be represented in different art forms, and specifically art forms where they aren't necessarily usually found, which I think the type of music that I make is one where traditionally there hasn't been a great LGBTQ representation. There aren't a lot of gay folk songs. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm always trying to incorporate that in a way that is authentic to myself, but also is, I guess, yeah, speaks for the shared experience that I know I have with the community.
For yourself as a queer artist, as a gay artist, I mean this may sound like an odd question just because of your particular situation, but have you come across any sort of, homophobia or anything like that when it comes to you and your dealings within the music community? You, have you had those experiences or not? I mean, to a certain degree, you're not necessarily out there booking gigs in bars or in
Mm.
certain venues or something. You know, whatever the venue might be. But in your dealings, have you had to deal with anything like that?
I guess I haven't in terms of professional stuff. I mean, of course
Hmm.
I have in my private life, in my real life. Over when I have been a person who is out amongst the world uh and I lived in New York City for 10 years and was actively out with the people then. And it was at least 10 years ago. So it was a different time. It's amazing how much has changed. And I even from here, from being here, I can see how much has changed in the last 10 years. But from a professional standpoint, yeah, I think because of my situation, like you were saying, I haven't really encountered much of that.
Mm,
For me, it's more about uh it's like I guess this probably plays into it in a way, but I feel that the only sort of difficulty I find in sort of trying to connect the music to an audience is people don't know what to do with it. They don't know where to place it because it doesn't fit into any kind of specific genre.
mm,
And I think that is true in a way too. I mean, the only sort of prejudice I've felt in relation specifically to the LGBTQ community is that when I've tried, for the most part, I mean, present company excluded, to reach out to LGBTQ specific media outlets to promote this music,
mm,
it's usually like this is nice, but this isn't what
mm,
we
mhm,
what we delve into.
mhm,
So I find that it's sort of a blessing and a curse in a way that what I do is sort of so singular.
mhm,
I mean, that's the goal, so I can't be upset about it, but it is in a way difficult to feel like no one knows quite what to do with it.
mhm. Have you heard of a Canadian group called the Cowboy Junkies?
I have, yeah.
Because I would say like you're similar to them in regards to, sort of like mid-tempo, slower
Mm,
uh type of material. So anyone who's
yeah,
a fan of Cowboy Junkies, check out Eric Terino, FYI.
yeah. I'll take that recommendation.
So you're an independent artist for yourself and your music. I was just talking to another queer indie band, and I asked them this the same question that I'm posing to yourself, and it's like technology has evolved, and we are we are reaping the benefits for that.
Mm,
But there's so much noise out there because everybody can release music, everybody can put out a podcast. So how do you cut through? How do you rise above? And for
yeah,
yourself
that
as
is the
the
question.
and for yourself as an independent artist, as an independent musician, how do you cut through the noise to be able to get your music heard?
I am still trying to figure that out, honestly, because that is the issue. There was a time, again, even just 10 years ago, when I think there was such a smaller amount of people producing work, like you were saying, podcasts, music, whatever it is. And, you would put out a record and people would know that it existed because it wasn't like all their friends were releasing records. And now it's just there's such an overwhelming amount of options because of the technology and because everything is so accessible, which yeah is a great benefit in a way, but certainly makes it more difficult to rise above it. And so honestly, I feel like the solution is just to keep striving, just keep doing what you're doing, to keep making work, to keep trying to reach out to people to see if they're interested in sharing it. And it's almost like the goal is to find sort of like sub communities within your community, and that's the place to start. So it's like if you are an LGBTQ artist, instead of just going to the broader LGBTQ community, you kind of would try to begin in sub communities and get your work known there and then see if it can expand to other sub communities and build up and up. That's been my sort of mindset in trying to get the work out there. But also, a big part of me feels that I can only do the best that I can do, and so I can't care too much about numbers and data and hitting goals and all of that kind of stuff. Those things are great if and when they happen, but I'm more focused on just making work that I'm proud of and hoping that it connects with whoever I can get to hear it.
Mm. Churches Rise on My Skeleton. Again, title,
Mm.
lyric. In a nutshell, where does that lyric come from?
So that
Churches
song,
Rise on My Skeleton.
yeah, I'm actually surprised not many people have asked about that specifically because I think that's probably the most difficult phrase of any of my song titles to get into to understand. But that song is about my friend who passed away, and ultimately what it was about was the phrase itself was having this conversation with the void, with the void left from her absence, and saying, if I wait for you, will I be waiting forever? That's ultimately what it was saying. Will I be waiting until my body crumbles, decomposes, they pave over it, they clear the pavement out, they build a new building, they knock that building down, they build a church? Well, it's that was the visual, is sort of like time passing and evolution taking place, and this idea that you would be waiting forever um, if you wait for someone who's passed to come back into your life. Um, yeah, so I just thought it was a beautiful image, this idea of decomposition and then specifically churches being built on the place where you're waiting. But yeah, that song was a difficult one to re-record, a difficult one to do initially. Um, but I was glad it was another song that I was glad to be able to re-examine and to do with a full band because when I did it the first time, when it was on the Champagne and Childhood Hunger album, it was just myself solo playing all the instruments and recording it um, solo. So to do it with the band was wonderful, and it was nice to think of my friend who passed and to know that she would appreciate hearing it with the band. And yeah, and it's a song that has connected with people. There's this wonderful guy who enjoys my music and sent me a photo that he got a tattoo of lyrics from that song on his
Mm.
his forearm, which was, very flattering.
I just have a handful of minutes with you, but have you seen or heard of a 2017 movie called A Ghost Story?
There's so many movies called A Ghost Story. Is it the one with
With, I think it's Ben Affleck.
I
No, not Ben Affleck, but his brother.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's I think I know where you're going, what you're going to say. That's sort of the visual, actually,
of what
that
your
things
of your
quickly
song.
changing. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In a way, maybe I was thinking of that. I mean, I had seen that movie when it came out. I'm
It's
sure
so
that,
haunting
yeah, no,
and
I loved
so
it. I loved
good.
that.
Have you thought of pitching your music to uh for film or TV or anything of the sort?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and I have actually, there, I was working with, a playwright who was putting on a play that I was going to do the music for, and I'm not sure exactly what happened with that project, but I think it's evolved into a film. And the last time I spoke with him, I was still considering doing some original music for that. But yeah, I think it would the stuff that I do would lend itself to that kind of thing. So I'm always open to that.
Well, I have to say, Eric Terino, well said, well done, well recorded. Thanks for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
Thanks for being on the show again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was wonderful to be back. Thank you so much for sharing the work and having me on.
Once purported